Hello and welcome back. Today we have Spooky Coincidences by Vsauce. I love Vsauce. These guys are amazing. And in the season of Halloween, I figured that this would be a really good video to watch. So let's hop right in. Okay, we're breaking some cans. What you got, Michael?
Sauce, yeah.
All right.
Hi, Vsauce.
Ah, he must have practiced that quite a bit. That was cool.
You can practice speaking backwards, so when your words are reversed, they're intelligible. But here's something else that is weird. The digits in the speed of light are exactly the same as the latitude of the Great Pyramid of Giza.
What?
And as the anagram genius
Really?
has revealed,
What?
all the world's a stage, but if you rearrange the letters in the meaning of life, it becomes the engine of a film. Or more pessimistically, the fine game of nil.
See, that one I believe.
What does all of this mean? Are these just coincidences? Or are greater powers at work? Why is it so easy for us to find hidden messages? Why can a mere coincidence give us chills? And why is it so fun? When you
wait a
reverse
second.
Neil Armstrong saying
What was that?
Small step for man.
What was that? Oh God, you know the sad part is this is actually believable in today's world that people would say, look at all these triangles. When are you going to wake up and see the Illuminati? The world is a crazy place these days, okay? It's a very crazy place.
Why is it so fun? When you reverse Neil Armstrong saying small step for man, you can hear what sounds like man will spacewalk.
That's one small step for man, small step for man, small step for man,
I love the whole reverse messages. It's something that's always intrigued me. Now, it's coincidence, okay? It just is. Let's not delve on that. It's coincidence. But I always thought that it was really cool to hide them in plain sight sometimes. Sort of like the Gravity Falls series that we're watching that I haven't posted on in a bit. But don't worry, I haven't forgotten about it. We'll get to it. Love that show.
Lee Harvey Oswald assassinated President John F. Kennedy, and in this interview, he defends the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, of which he was a member.
The fact that I did live for a time in the Soviet Union gives me excellent qualifications to repudiate charges that Cuba and the Fair Play for Cuba Committee is communist controlled.
Now listen to what it sounds like when we reverse him saying, and the Fair Play for Cuba.
And the Fair Play for Cuba,
Yeah, that's a stretch. It's a stretch for
Is that
sure.
a coincidence? Or a subconscious confession hidden within his own words?
No, it's a coincidence.
It's a coincidence.
Interesting
For crying out
coincidence,
loud,
though.
If anybody says, and the Fair Play for Cuba, and then reverses it, it sounds the same. This app, by the way, is called Virtual Recorder. It's a really easy way to quickly reverse your own speech.
Okay.
Matthew Hudson, in The 7 Laws of Magical Thinking, points out that if you record yourself saying, ooh, you sniff turkey fat, and then reverse
Why?
it sounds a bit like happy birthday to you. Kind of. If a word can be spelled the same forward and backward, it's a palindrome. But if a word or phrase sounds the same, whether spoken.
Why is palindrome not a palindrome? I feel like they could have made that word a palindrome, right? They could have made some effort to make sure that the word that describes what a palindrome is in fact itself one. That's just laziness, guys. Do better, English.
Forward or rewound, it is a phonetic palindrome. For example, say yes. Reversed? Say yes. Pretty cool. But check out this poem by Karsten Johansson. When I wonder why what's never been's never been so, we would lie when we say, yes, you know we all love you. What's never been's never been so, hell, we're nowhere now. I wonder what was never been's that we lie when we say yes, seem to be all that we was never been's that we all were nowhere now. By the way, some
That's
people
cool.
speak in reverse.
How in the heck do you go about writing a poem like that sounds the same backwards as forwards? That is, like, is that just a ton of trial and error? Or is that a careful planning? That is impressive.
On the fly. It is really cool to see them in action. Watch guys lean back after this video. It's linked down in the description and it's full of pretty cool coincidence videos. Apophenia is the perception of connections or patterns in information.
I just noticed that the sign behind him is different than it was when we started, right? Or is it the same side just on its side? Heh. Interesting.
One type of apophenia is pareidolia, the seeing or hearing of things that weren't meant to be there. For instance, hearing your name being called or your phone ringing in the sound of running water, or hearing English words in a non-English song, or seeing faces that weren't purposefully placed there.
Our brains are wired to see faces. It's part of our fight or flight response. We have to identify risk, identify threats to ourselves. And in our world, the quickest way, and in our evolutionary history, to identify a potential threat is a face. Not necessarily a human face, it could be an animal face, but nonetheless a face. Something akin to two eyes, a nose, a mouth, maybe ears, those types of things. So yeah, we are hardwired programmed to see them. So it's not surprising that we would see them where they're not.
Our brains are good at this kind of work, probably because being hyper attentive to patterns and faces can save your life. If there's ambiguity as to whether that thing hiding in the shadows is a threat or just a shadow, it's advantageous to err on the side of threat.
Yeah.
Organisms with a healthy sense of apophenia live longer, long enough to have kids and raise them and naturally become the norm. We connect with faces so well. Hudson relates a story of a friend who draws faces on things she doesn't want to lose, like her bags. She says the faces make her less likely to forget about them. If you
that's
like
interesting.
it, you should have put a ring on it. If you like
Kinda wanna
not
try
losing
that.
it, you should have drawn a face on it. We are so good at teasing out patterns and faces from random noise. Actual random sequences don't always feel random to us.
That's actually an interesting story. When iTunes came out, it had a random mode, right? A random song selection mode. And it was truly random. But people got mad because it would play randomly songs of the same genre next to each other, or songs by the same artist next to each other, or maybe even the same song twice in a row because it's cycling through the playlist. And people were upset because it didn't feel random, but it truly was. And so they actually had to adjust the algorithm that determined the random songs to actually be less random and actually rule out and modify some of those decisions. So that way it wasn't playing songs by the same artist or songs of the same genre next to each other or songs that were too similar, etc. So when you hit shuffle on your playlist, it's not truly random anymore because of that. Quite interesting.
Originally, Apple's iTunes Shuffle feature generated complaints from users. They said that similar songs or
That's a spooky coincidence right there. I've never seen this video before. Oh my god.
songs from the same artist appeared in a string, which of course is to be expected from randomness, but it didn't feel random enough. So Apple introduced a smart shuffle that avoided totally random sequences.
I can't believe
that
this. This is
nonetheless
crazy.
Didn't seem random to our pattern-loving
Wow.
brains. As Steve Jobs explained, we're making it less random to make it feel more random. Our impressive ability
It's
to
crazy.
imagine patterns also expresses itself when it comes to connecting songs and moving images. This dancing Spider-Man animation will famously sync up with any music you play. Try it. What kind of black magic is going on here? Well, as it turns out, most of it is in our heads.
Kind of do want to try that
Radiolab
now.
reported that Michigan State University explains that the major movements of dancing animations like this one, or this one, move at typical song tempos, but also contain, like most dance, various other different related rhythms of movement, allowing them to seemingly fit many different tempos.
Yeah, that's pretty
Selection
cool.
bias helps a lot too. We fall prey to this when we reject all the times the animation doesn't really sync up, focusing instead on the more surprising times when it does. The bizarre pyramid coincidence mentioned earlier is a lot less bizarre when you consider the fact that we got to control where we placed the decimal point, and that a number of degrees this precise isn't necessary to locate the pyramid. By the fourth decimal, we're only talking about a matter of a few meters, so it's easy to make the rest fit the speed of light exactly and have still picked a point on the pyramid.
That's a good point.
Confirmation bias
Still,
also comes into
though.
play here. If you really want two things
cool.
to sync up, they will. We often look for evidence that supports what we already believe while marginalizing things against it. As Marshall McLuhan said, I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't have believed it. These biases also help explain the seemingly mind-blowing coincidence that famous movies and famous albums can line up. One of the most popular states that if you start playing Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon at the same time as The Wizard of Oz, they will eerily line up.
Really?
Entire communities have sprouted around the syncing of movies and albums.
What? I've never heard of that before. Now I feel like I need to go watch The Wizard of Oz with the album on. It's a good album. Huh. I've never heard that was a thing.
Some of my favorites are the Yellow Submarine soundtrack and The Little Mermaid, Lord's Pure Heroine and Twilight Saga Breaking Dawn 2, and the end of 2001 A Space Odyssey with Pink Floyd's Echoes. There are conspiracies that these were somehow secretly planned, though in reality they're just accidental music videos, the product of selection bias, confirmation bias, and the law of near enough.
Confirmation bias is a scary thing in and of itself. It really is. I mean, how do you actually avoid confirmation bias? You have to change your entire mindset, which is really hard to do. You can set out with the intention of changing your mindset, but actually fundamentally changing your mindset to try and disprove yourself instead of prove yourself right. Very, very difficult to do. Very difficult.
A behavior of our pattern-sensitive minds. Two things don't have to line up exactly or literally for us to see a connection. This is why vague predictions are a great way to look psychic. These are also actually unsurprising when you...
That's one of the things, if you ever look at some of the most famous prediction people in the past, what's his name? What's his name? Oh my God. Asmodeus? Nostradamus. There we go. I got something else stuck in my head. Nostradamus. His predictions are so extremely vague. And when you first read through them, it's super easy to kind of miss that and to take what you already know and apply it to what's being said. It's very easy to do that and say, look, this is true because they match. But then if you kind of reread it, talking about confirmation bias, if you reread it in a different light, it's really easy to notice that, wow, this could apply to a lot of things. It is extremely vague. It's worded in ways of things that are almost certainly going to happen eventually, right? It's worded as catch-alls. It's a perfect example of confirmation bias seeping in.
You consider the fact that the number of narrative paces and rhythms we enjoy and typically use are much smaller than the number possible.
Hey, the robot
In the
changed
improbability
again.
principle, David J. Hand calls this the probability lever. What may be rare on average, or when considering all possible scenarios, can be less rare for specific scenarios, even if they are only marginally different. Getting struck by lightning is a proverbially unlikely event.
Yeah.
But Walter Summerford wasn't just struck by lightning once during his life, he was struck 3 times.
Wow.
It never killed him, but 4 years after his death, his gravestone was also struck by
No
lightning.
way.
What are the chances? I mean, clearly, Summerford
Wow.
was some sort of robot built out of lightning rods, or had somehow angered Zeus, right? Probably not. You see, while for the average person, the chance of being struck by lightning is quite low, for an avid outdoor sportsman like Summerford, it's not as low.
Yeah.
The law of truly large numbers also comes into play here, with lightning striking Earth 40 to 50 times a second. Billions of people for it to strike and thousands of years of recorded history, it's actually not surprising at all that at least once a story like Summerford's would have happened.
Yeah, that's true. That's a really good perspective, actually. Is something that overall can be extremely rare, under certain circumstances can be extremely common. A really good example would be the amount of people that die a year by falling into septic tanks. I don't know where I pulled that from, but that's got to be a really low number, right? So statistically speaking, your chances of dying from falling into a septic tank are probably near 0. But if you're someone who drains septic tanks for a living, maybe that's a little bit higher of a chance, right? So that's a good example. But yeah, absolutely. It's all about perspective. Everything is relative.
Given the truly large number of people who visit Disney World every day, and the fact that they take photos and lots of them, it's actually not surprising at all that at least once so far, a story like Alex and Donna Vsauce's has happened. While sorting through old photos before their wedding, Alex and Donna found a photo of Donna at Disney World 14 years before the couple met. But then Alex noticed something. He too had visited Disney World as a child, and there, in the background, was his father pushing him in a stroller.
That's crazy.
Sometimes coincidences can be tragic. In 1864, Abraham Lincoln's son, Robert Lincoln, was
That robot
saved from
picture
serious
keeps
injury
changing.
or possibly even death when a stranger grabbed him by the shirt collar moments before he plunged onto train tracks below. That stranger turned out to be Edwin Booth, one of the most famous Shakespearean actors of the time. So famous, in fact, Robert recognized him and had a letter sent thanking him for saving his life.
No way.
Less than a year later,
No way.
Edwin Booth's brother, John Wilkes Booth, undid the favor by assassinating Abraham Lincoln.
That's crazy.
Strange as they seem at first,
What?
math says that given enough time, and psychology says that given enough interest in finding them, coincidences and connections will be found, even unlikely ones. The coincidences between Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy are famous. Both were elected to the presidency in a year ending with 60. Lincoln was shot at Ford's Theater. Kennedy
Yeah.
was shot in a 1961 Lincoln Continental 4-door convertible made by Ford. Both presidents' last names have 7 letters, and both assassins had 15 letters in their names. The list goes on.
I really like that part that he mentioned about given enough interest, you will find coincidences. That's very true. You can come up with numbers and patterns and stuff all day long if you try hard enough with any set of data. I'm a strong believer of that.
As it should. If you look long enough, you can find coincidences between any 2 people or things or events. They may seem strange at first, but tend to wind up being, in the end, pretty expected. For just one example, name length isn't that wildly variable. 7-letter
No.
names are pretty common. Lincoln, Kennedy, Michael, Stevens. In the famous Spooky Presidential Coincidences contest held by the Skeptical Inquirer in 1992, one contestant alone found similar lists of crazy coincidences between 21 pairs of former presidents. Given the vast amount of details in any one of our lives, it's pretty easy. This quirk can be exploited to almost comedic heights when it comes to overanalyzing.
Yeah.
Of course, hidden messages and signs are often intentionally included in media for fun or to reward attentive viewers. But unintentional, extraordinary things happen all the time. It's not really that extraordinary. There's a famous calculation that is known as Littlewood's law. Given the number of hours we are awake every day, and assuming an event only takes about a second to occur, if you calculate the odds of something happening to you are only 1 in a million, well, you should expect that thing to happen to you about once every 35 days. David J. Hand took this even further with 7 billion people on Earth. The chance that an event with a 1 in a million probability of
8
happening
billion, no.
to each of us won't happen today is 1 in 10 to the 3,040. As Percy Diaconus put it, the truly unusual day would be a day where nothing unusual happens.
Yeah.
And as always, thanks for watching.
Thank you, Michael. I love Vsauce. 1, 2, 3. Absolutely brilliant. And Michael there on Vsauce 1 is one of the godfathers of YouTube as far as I'm concerned. He really accelerated and brought to the limelight YouTube education. And I still follow him today on some of his YouTube shorts that he posts. Absolutely brilliant, by the way, worth a follow. So anyway, love these guys. Happy Halloween if it's something that you celebrate. I hope that you have a safe and fun holiday. And thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And I hope that you have yourself a wonderful day.